Okay, so let's try one example of each. This says to find the vertex and axis of symmetry for each of them. We're going to actually go ahead and find all of the information that you're going to be asked to do on your homework. So first of all, identify this form. This form right here has parentheses with a squared. So parentheses with squared means that we're talking about vertex form. So vertex form is, I think, the easiest because you don't have to do a whole lot of work. You immediately find your vertex. So my vertex, we're going to take from the equation. So I see that x plus 3 squared plus 9. So x plus 3 means that my x coordinate is going to be negative 3 because remember it's the opposite. And then the y-coordinate is exactly what's there. So the vertex is negative 3, 9. Now my axis of symmetry, which I'll say is AOS, first thing I want to remember is that has to be a line, x equals. And that's going to be negative 3 because whatever your x-coordinate of your vertex is, that's what your axis of symmetry is. They're the same value. Now I have to decide if this is a maximum or a minimum. And because this is negative out front, that means my parabola would be opening down, which means I'm going to have a maximum value, and I'm going to have a maximum value at 9. Now, whatever the y-coordinate of my vertex is, that's my max or my min value. So the very last thing I'm going to do is I'm going to find my y-intercept, and you find your y-intercept just by plugging in 0 for x. So my y-intercept is going to be 0, comma, something. So I'm going to do that by plugging in 0 into my equation. So negative 0 plus 3 squared plus 9 becomes a negative 3 squared plus 9. 3 squared is the only thing that's being squared. It's just the 3. The negative is going to stay on the outside. So negative 9 plus 9 means that the y-coordinate of my y-intercept is going to be 0. Okay, so checking out number 2, this is in standard form. Now I know that it's in standard form because it has an x squared in it. It also has this b term that has an x. Now you'll also sometimes see them in standard form. You could have like negative x squared plus 8. That would also be standard form. Your b value would just be 0. So this is standard form. Now I'm going to go ahead and find my vertex. But in order to find your vertex with standard form, you have to first find your axis of symmetry. And you're going to do that by using the equation x equals negative b. So what does that mean? Well, my b value here is the whole thing, the negative 2. So if b equals negative 2, then negative b is going to equal positive 2. So negative b over 2 times my a value. My a value is the coefficient of x squared, which is a negative 1. So I'm going to go ahead and simplify that. 2 divided by negative 2 equals negative 1. So my AOS officially is x equals negative 1. Well, that should automatically tell me that the x-coordinate of my vertex is also negative 1 because remember, axis of symmetry, x value of your vertex is the same. To find the y-coordinate of the vertex, what you have to do is we have to take this negative 1 and plug it into our equation. So negative 1 squared minus 2 times negative 1 plus 8. So negative 1 squared here, this negative is being squared, so that becomes a 1. Negative 2 times negative 1 is positive 2 plus 8. So all of this becomes 9. So now the y-coordinate of my vertex is 9. This parabola is also opening down because of the leading coefficient being negative, which means I'll have a maximum value here, and the maximum is going to be at 9 again. And that's only at 9 because the y-coordinate of the vertex is 9, so your max is at 9. Very last thing that we're going to look for are just one, y-intercept. So my y-intercept is going to have an ordered pair of 0, comma, something. And the way that we're going to do that is we're going to plug in 0 into my equation. So negative 0 squared minus 2 times 0 plus 8 is going to equal 8. So all of my important information here, vertex, AOS, maximum, and y-intercept. Now this very last one here is in intercept form. And it's in intercept form. We can see that because we have two sets of parentheses, or we have parentheses without a squared. So taking the difference between number 1, which is in vertex form, we have parentheses squared. Here we have parentheses without any squared. So that's going to be intercept form because I've got my factors listed. So First thing I want to do is I want to find my p and q values by solving those factors. So x plus 3 equals 0 and x minus 1 equals 0. So this will give me x equals -3 and x equals 1. So it doesn't matter which one's p and which one's q. I'm just going to go ahead and say p is -3 and q is 1. So in order to find that vertex in the axis of symmetry, we have to use our formula, which is p plus q divided by 2. So AOS, I'm going to go ahead and take my p, which is -3, plus q, which is 1, divided by 2. So that gives me an axis of symmetry of -1. Now, saying an axis of symmetry of -1 is not good enough. You have to say x equals -1. So that's my AOS. Now my vertex is going to be -1. Again, x-coordinate of your vertex and the axis of symmetry are the same. The way that you're going to find the y-coordinate of your vertex is the same way that we found the y-coordinate in standard form. We're going to go ahead and take that x-coordinate and plug it back in. So 2 times -1 plus 3 times -1 minus 1. So 2 times 2 and -2. So inside these parentheses, I just want you to notice that those are the same number with different signs. That's always going to happen. So when I multiply all of that together, I end up with -8. So this -8 here represents the y-coordinate of my vertex. So now I've got the vertex, I've got the axis of symmetry. The next thing I want to go ahead and do is find my intercepts. So with intercept form, you're going to have x and y intercepts. My x-intercepts are really easy to find because with those are just coming from the p and q values that I already have. So my x-intercepts are going to be -3, 0, and then 1, 0. And that -3 and 1 just came from the p and the q values here. So finally, your y-intercept comes from plugging in 0 into my equation. So I can do that by taking 2 times 0 plus 3 times 0 minus 1. So that's going to give me 2 times 3 times -1. Well, dang it, will be -6. Okay, so that means that my y-intercept would have 0, -6 as the ordered pair. Remember, we're writing those as ordered pairs. Now, the very last thing that we're going to want would be our x-intercepts. I've totally run out of room, so I'm going to squeeze that in right here. Your x-intercepts are also ordered pairs where the y-coordinate is 0. My x-intercepts are going to be from these values, what my x values are. So that would be -3, 0, and 1, 0.